So once we have those 3 things completed, you've filled out your food journal for the 2 days, filled out everything about it, then you've highlighted everything in red, green, or yellow for the dining by traffic light, and then after you've done your daily dozen checklist, then we're going to come back here and we're going to go to Nutrition Week 3 at school, and it is the Sugar Food Journal edit. So we will click on that and we'll go here, and it gives us a little rundown of all of the things about sugar. There's no video to watch this time, so it'll just be me explaining what you need to do. So again, you'll go back to your food journal and it explains, if we go back up to the top here, that you will be filling out your sugar and your fiber for each of the things you've eaten. You'll fill them out in grams. So for something like a banana, for example, or my Nutri-Grain bar that I had, you will have to look those things up and type it in. It's fairly simple to do. You go into Google, as I show you, and you can go sugar in banana. And it tells you, in one banana, one medium-sized banana, you will have 14 grams of sugar. And then you can do the same thing with fiber as well. 3.1 grams, and that's where I got it. So you can look all of these things up on Google, or if you, alternatively, if you have the packaging for some of these things, you can look at the nutrition facts label. It should say it near like the last third quarter of it. It should say the amount of sugar in grams per serving, and then the amount of fiber in grams per serving. And be sure to really, really look at the serving size as well, because that's going to be really important. So, say if you had a big bunch of grapes, and the serving size for grapes it could be about a cup, it could be about like 15 grapes, something like that, but you had a whole bunch of grapes. Maybe you had twice as many. You would need to multiply the amount of sugar in those grapes by 2, and you would also need to multiply the amount of fiber by 2 as well. Same with anything else, especially breakfast cereals, because breakfast cereals are going to be very tricky, or any sort of non-nutritious food, because the serving sizes are going to be relatively small, and if you have a good amount of it, or if you have a pretty big amount of it, you will have to multiply it multiple times over. So, for example, with maybe some Cheerios, I think the serving size for Cheerios is probably like 3/4 of a cup, or 2/3 of a cup, something close to that. But most of us aren't going to eat just a little 2/3 of a cup. We're going to eat a big bowl full of it, which would probably be like 2 or 3 times larger than the actual serving size recommends. So then in that case, you would take the amount of sugar that it states for one serving, and you would multiply that by 2 or 3, or 2.5 and 3.5, things like that. And you go down the line, and you do every single thing on your food journal for both days. You'll do day 1 and you'll do day 2. I haven't fully completed day 2 yet, so I'm showing you my day 1. Yeah, like I said, my banana, it was 14 grams of sugar. I only had one of those, so it was 14 grams by itself, and it was 3.1 grams of fiber. My Nutri-Grain bar then was 11 grams of sugar, and it was 2.6 grams of fiber. So things like that, things that are sort of healthy, sort of like a little processed or even just natural foods, they should have a good amount of a mix of fiber and sugar. But then you notice the thing like my York peppermint patty that I had, it was 27 grams of sugar, which is a lot. And it's a good thing I didn't have more than one of those, because that would just blow me out of the water. And it had barely any fiber in it. You will also notice that water does not have any sugar or fiber. My rice crackers, they had a little bit of fiber, but they didn't have too much sugar. And then with things like animal products will not have fiber in them. They probably won't even have sugar in them. So, yeah, we can see my roast beef. I didn't put any sugar in my roast beef because that would just be weird. But yeah, my roast beef did not have any sugar in it. And since it is not made of plant material, since it is an animal, it was from an animal, it has no fiber in it. You will notice that most things that are made from plants have fiber in them, because plants are fibrous. Funny that. But yeah, you will go down the line, you will do all of that, and then at the end, if you have a free space, total all of it up for that day. I haven't calculated that out. I also haven't finished with this part of it, so I don't know the total yet. But you will do the total in grams. Let's say mine's probably about 58, something like that. Grams total. And then just sort of looking at this, I probably only have maybe 10 grams of fiber, all in all. And we'll probably start to notice that our sugar content is going to be a lot higher than our fiber content, and that's fine. We just have to work towards healthier choices, having more fiber in our diet, and possibly less sugar in our diet. We don't want zero sugars. Of course, our body still needs sugars to, run and to work, so our pancreas has something to do. But we don't want to overload ourselves with sugar, and that's where the obesity epidemic comes from, is from all of the sugars in all of the things in our food. So then, once you do all of that, you calculate all of these out for both days. I don't want a total for both days. I want a total for each individual day, but you will have to do both days regardless. Once you do all of that, then you go back to the food journal edit, and there are sugar questions, which you will need to copy and paste into your food journal. And again, you'll go down here and you'll answer these sugar questions, and even the first one is, have you exceeded the recommendations for sugar limits on either of the 2 days? And I have, unfortunately, and most of our diets probably are over the recommended dose because, the American diet isn't too great. And again, like I said, highlight your answer so I can see it. So, actually, that does not look good. Let's do something a bit more visible, but let's just highlight it. Yes, I did exceed the recommendation. What food or drink added the most grams of sugar to your diet each of those 2 days? I did have that York peppermint patty, and that was very high in sugar. I had the York patty. And again, it's sort of hard to see because the answer blends in, which is why I really would like you to highlight all of your answers so I can see them. And so you know that you've done them, and so I know that you've done them all. So we can get those out of the way. But that's really it. It takes a bit of time to research everything and add everything up, especially when you're working with multiple amounts of things. So if you had 3 bananas, that would be 14 times 3, or if you had more than the recommended dose of any of these, I guess. And a great resource, I forgot to mention this, a great resource would be fooducate.com. It's a play on words of food and educate. You can look up basically anything in here. So you can look up, let's say an orange. It'll have oranges in here. A medium-sized orange is going to be about 61 calories. And then you'll scroll down, and you'll see here, there's going to be the nutrition facts label. So one medium-sized orange is going to have that many calories. And then you'll scroll down, total carbs, you will have 3, I guess, a pie amount of fiber, and then you will have 12.2 grams of sugar. And since it's all natural, there's not going to be any added sugars. But then if we did something like Gatorade, and we looked that up, thirst quencher, it doesn't matter what flavor it is, they're all going to be about the same. We'll scroll down again. We'll see the serving size is 1 bottle, and if you have 2 or 3, or if you have more than 360 milliliters of a bottle, which should be about 24 ounces, I guess, then you will multiply it. Again, if you had the liter size bottle of it, then you would calculate that out. That would be 1,000 milliliters, so you would have to do the math there. But just for the all intents and purposes of 1 bottle, it doesn't have any fiber because it's not plant material. and it would have 21 grams of sugar. And as we can see, the added sugars are 21 grams. It's just added sugar. Things like that. You can look up anything on here, well, most anything, and get a result. But if you had something homemade, like if you had homemade pasta, or if you had some sort of homemade sauce, or homemade salsa, or whatever it might be, just try and remember what some of the ingredients are. And if you don't remember, you can ask your parents or whoever made the food. You can ask them and see what was maybe in the food, and then go off of the main ingredients there, which is why it's important to list out some of these ingredients. Like, especially for like my stew. If I just said stew, well, I wouldn't know what was in stew. And Fooducate.com wouldn't tell me what kind of stew I've been eating. But as long as I have each of these individual items that I can look up, it gives me each of the individual sugar and fiber contents of each one. Because, again, Fooducate only knows so much, so you have to type in the individual things. And I don't need an entire list of every single piece of ingredient of everything that you've put into whatever food or whatever meal that you've had. Just like the main ones that you can remember. So if you have like a big ol' honkin' greasy burger, and it's got bacon on it, and it's got a slice of cheese on it, and it's got tomatoes, lettuce, mayo, ketchup, all of that stuff, you might have to look up each of those ingredients. Although, especially with like pickles and onions, usually there's like little tiny chopped up onions. That's not really worth it. Maybe there's only like one slice of tomato. It's not going to be really worth it. But the cheese is going to be pretty substantial. If you have, if you put bacon on top of your burger, that's going to be pretty substantial. The sauces, like the ketchup and the mayo, we can even look that up. Mayo. How do we spell mayo? Mayonnaise. I mean, whatever kind of mayonnaise, like there's even Sonic mayonnaise, there's just mayo, things like that. So pick the closest one, and if you don't really know, then you can just pick the one that's nearest to it. The real mayonnaise, something like that. Then you'll go down here, 1 tablespoon. And 1 tablespoon is, about that size. It's like one of those cups that you would get at McDonald's. That's about a tablespoon. And if you put any more on that, or if you put any less on that, then you would have to do a little bit of math for it. There's no fiber, and there's hardly any sugar in mayo, so there's not much to worry about. But something like ketchup, for a tablespoon, again about the same amount. Yeah, 1 tablespoon. It's going to have 4 grams of added sugar, and 4 grams of total sugar and 2 grams of added sugar. And we're looking at the total sugars. Because, again, you ate this, so you did get those 4 grams of sugar. We're not just going to do the added sugars. We're going to do every single bit of sugar. Because there's some natural sugars, because ketchup is made from tomatoes, and those tomatoes have natural sugars in them. But, again, the fiber got taken out because it's been so heavily processed. But then they added sugar to make ketchup a little bit sweeter. So then, if you did have ketchup on your burger or whatever, then you would add that to it. And you would write down how many grams of sugar and how many grams of fiber, which the fiber would be 0, but the sugar would be 4. And then again, you total all of these up, and you give me the total at the end of the day, which will help you answer the sugar questions. And that's it.